So you'll quickly get why I thought it was a good idea to transition to the top 3, because you'll see that it's just a continuation of what we were discussing.
I'm pretty sure your top 3 will be the top 3 ways to replace PFAS, right?
Not at all.
No, not at all.
Not
Okay.
at all.
I was thinking it's something
So
smart.
My top 3 is going to be about smoke curtains.
Smoke curtains.
Yes. It's 3 news we've heard over the past weeks and months where we're like, wow, that's a good idea. Like almost as good as let's ban PFAS, but even better. And I'd like to explain why it's a lame, like incredibly lame idea. And my number 3, and you'll see the link, is we've heard that 3M wants to stop producing PFAS. They announced it. They made an official press release saying that they acknowledge that indeed PFAS is dangerous. And so they don't want to be part of that anymore. And so that's why they stopped PFAS. And the result was exactly what 3M expected, I guess, which was everybody start applauding and say, wow, they realized there's a problem. They finally took their responsibility and they decided to stop the production. You've recalled the dates. It's not anything new that they know that it is dangerous. So what has changed? Why did 3M decide to stop producing PFAS?
And most probably because of the chem index. There's a chem index which takes the 55 biggest chem companies and rank them in terms of their behavior, call it this way.
So
and
ESG?
3M is so number 55. So on the last place, guess who is DuPont? And somewhere in the middle is 3M. So I'm pretty sure they want to step up a little bit.
ESG, finance, advisors telling them they should go, maybe probably activist investors as well, saying, hey, we should maybe move out of that. That's one part of the story. I would also bet that the fact that EPA in the US came out and said, as we discussed, divide by 17,000 the threshold at which things get dangerous. And we also say that Genix is dangerous and so far and so on. Now they cannot play the card that they don't know the liability. So they have a high liability and they acknowledge the liability and they want to get a bit this virtuous image of we were the first to pull out and to say we go out of PFAS. Now let's look at the numbers. 3M does roughly 9% of its turnover on PFAS. Yeah. So sure, when you're a company and you cut 9% of your business,
1.9 billion, I think,
it is
somehow
something. It's not like 0, but it's not like I'm cutting 90% either. So it's not that much of a harm, first. And second, they say they cut, but they don't say to replace with what, because they still produce protective equipment, fire retarded clothing, and so far and so on. So if they don't treat those with PFAS, with what do they replace it? Even further.
So you are saying it is just a move due to the fact that they are a little bit want to be the first to shoot that out, because everybody is more shouting and screaming after the big players that they are.
When I interviewed Paul Gallet, he had this formula to say,
back in the bad old days with DuPont and 3M, EPA knew the results of a lot of the studies that were being done and did not act.
To him, that's what comes next to PFAS. And I think 3M plays that game of how do I pull out so that I'm no longer associated with DuPont, I'm no longer associated with PFAS because I'm the good guy. But wait, they said they stopped producing PFAS, and that's good on them. But maybe I've misread that press release, but I've seen nowhere the mention that they stop using it, because they're producing their own PFAS, which they put on their own equipment.
Sure.
But if they stop producing it, what prevents them from going to another company producing PFAS and buying that, as any purchasing department would do, and use a supplier of PFAS, which would then go on their equipment, and their equipment would still have the same amount of PFAS. I have no data. This is pure speculation. I don't want you to say what I haven't said. I'm just saying that it sounds to me a bit short to just say I pull out of PFAS. Because do people really think that the amount of PFAS produced in the world changed because 3M announced they pull out?
I mean, not overnight. Definitely not.
To me, it just means that there is a new market opportunity for the other producers of PFAS.
Maybe
one of the competitors of the market, it's going to be more easy to get the market share for your existing PFAS.
Maybe 3M will acquire, I don't know, Toray, to have also a membrane supplier to get rid of the PFAS out of the water.
And 3M as a face.
I mean, how?
When 3M was producing PFAS, at least we knew that 3M was producing PFAS. Now that 3M pulls out, whoever no-name company takes that market and is going to produce the same PFAS in conditions we don't know and in places we don't know, because it's not 3M anymore. So we simply have to waste a bit of time to understand who it was. So I'm not saying it's a bad move. I'm just saying that uploading the move just and saying, wow, they pulled it off PFAS.
But let's say based on what you said in the editorial, you would definitely bet on the fact that they will be bankrupt maybe in whenever. Because
Actually,
I mean, they should all be in charge. 3M was the first to produce PFAS. Full stop.
But still, I guess the move is to prevent to be bankrupt. It's also to say, look,
so that's a move.
You just changed the level at which I'm liable. Well, I didn't realize that it was so dangerous. I'm really sorry, Mr. US EPA. Hence, as a good guy, which I am, I'm pulling out.
I don't think that is so easy.
But maybe I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying. And
what was the reason why they really did this? I mean, there must be a reason, and I think they saw this somehow coming. It's coming more and more. EPA is more and more stricter.
It sounds to me like when my daughter is doing something really stupid, and she knows it is something really stupid. And I come to tell her that she should be stopping doing that because it's really stupid. And she sees me coming before I even say something. She say, "Oh, I'll stop that," because she's not stupid. And if she does that, she thinks that I'm gonna be so proud of her because she stopped on herself.
This is a good question. 3M was producing products, and they use PFAS for that. How do they replace? Do they have no longer the products, or is it really that they just stopped producing PFAS to sell to others? So what about their products which include PFAS? That would be the big question here.
Hey 3M, you see, I have just a question, and I no one to doubt your sincerity when you're making such a move. So you probably know why you did it, and maybe you didn't get the chance to explain it. So just reach out to us. We'd be happy to have you and for you to say why you pulled out. For me, not knowing, it just sounds suspicious. But I don't know anything. It's pure speculation. So that was my number 3. And I see that on that one, at least we agree. Number 2.
There was nothing to agree about. I mean, there was nothing to agree about. I mean, don't say that we agree. You're just saying they stepped out and that you don't get it. What's your point?
Not saying that I don't get it. I say that we should just stop uploading that. It doesn't make any sense. But okay, you want to be contrarian for the sake of being contrarian. I will let you be contrarian, so you're happy, Björn. So number 2, there was this aha moment in July 2022, EPA coming out, doing this big announcement, this series of big announcements. And to me, it raises more questions than it brings answers for 2 main reasons. The first reason is, okay, now we go to parts per quadrillion. So we have to make sure it's not a must. If you take this German way to look at it, which have these 2 ways of muss and soll. I don't know how to translate the soll in English, but it would be something like you should against you must. I guess that's the best translation. It is a health advisory, which EPA put out. It is not a regulation. It is a health advisory.
But they said clearly, hey, we have to monitor over the next years even further. And then that's what I said in my editorial. And after that, you will, another period of time, you will monitor even more, or maybe in that direction. So it's so boring, isn't it, guys?
Since July, I've seen GWI making articles saying we await every second minute there will be the regulation is finally going to go out, but still didn't see anything. And maybe it will come eventually. I'm just saying that in between, it raises questions. You have these parts per quadrillion. We have 4,700 PFAS officially. If you look at the lab analysis, we have in fact different ways of analyzing PFAS, but when it really goes to analyzing the PFAS themselves, there are 29 PFAS which are possible to analyze. So 29 out of the 4,700, which means all the others are analyzed as a proxy.
Isn't that the same as for the micropollutants?
Exactly. It's the same as for the micropollutants. Exactly. Even for micropollutants, nobody came with a threshold at parts per quadrillion.
No.
So parts per quadrillion means high-end spectroscopy or laser-induced stuff. I mean, basically, if you want the technology to measure that, I know one device to do that. And I was going to say one device on Earth, but that's not true. It's the NASA rover on Mars, which has such a laser. Probably there's a copycat somewhere on Earth. I doubt it is in every water laboratory. So first, you go to parts per quadrillion.
That was, by the way, sarcasm. Hopefully you heard that.
Parts per quadrillion doesn't really help. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, in this announcement, there was also a major thing. They have officially banned 12 PFAS. They took their strictest look. They put the line on the paper. They took their best pen and they strike through those 12 and they say, those 12, they are banned forever. We don't want to see them anymore. And I think the last time those 12 were used was in the 80s. So they just banned 12 substances.
But you see, it is possible to ban something.
Yeah, once it's not in use anymore for 40 years. So It's like...
Maybe not in the US, but most probably still in Europe, because we are 40 years back behind the US.
I would strongly disagree with that. I think when it comes to PFAS, the US have been better at communicating, but in fact, REACH was long time in advance of Europe. The thresholds in drinking water are way ahead of the US. You have regulations and threshold for total PFAS in the European regulation, when the US still don't have regulations for single PFAS, so let alone a regulation for the total of them. You have some states and some cities which go beyond, but in terms of US in general...
But they have the money. They want to spend, how much is it, 5 billion or 3 + 2 or something like that, which was the Biden administration at the beginning.
I'm just saying that health advisory itself, I'm not sure if it really helps. I even had that discussion on my podcast with Josiah Cox, which is operating plants and which says clearly...
First of all, the EPA issued health guidance. They haven't actually issued any formal rulemaking yet. And I would also say, from being inside the industry, their health guidance was not helpful. They issued guidance for levels that are below minimum detection. If I can't detect it in the water, how am I going to treat it?
That doesn't help at all. It's rather the opposite, because it's creating some insecurity in people, because you just put big numbers and then you have to explain.
But there's one industry which is saying, yes, finally. You know which ones?
Bottled water?
Well, yes, you're right. The other ones are the laboratories who are able to measure that, because you have to take the water, find a lab which can measure, what is that?
Parts per quadrillion.
Exactly. So
it's LCMS or GCMS. You don't have that much ways to do it.
I mean, how many labs are there on Earth who can do that? And the ones who have this technology would say, yes, they're all coming to me.
Well, that's a very expensive technology, so it's fair that they do some money.
We should invest in that. We should invest in that.
No, but to me, the worst part of that was really the banning of the 12 PFAS.
Does 3M or Dow or DuPont has such a lab division? We should investigate that.
No, you're beyond sarcasm here, but okay. But yeah, to me also, this 12 banned PFAS was like, everybody was like, oh, look, they're banning something. Yeah, it's like when Switzerland took a micropollutant regulation which was banning atrazine. And atrazine is a pesticide which is no longer in use since the 70s. Of course, it is a persistent in the environment, so it still makes sense for environmental reason. But in fact, you're banning something that nobody uses. So that was my number 2. My number 1 is a bit harder, because I don't want to sound negative to the research team that came up with that, because they found out something which might be, on the long run, assuming they develop it and they bring it to the full scale, which might be revolutionary. But people have distorted that reality, and they have taken the announcement of that research team, they have turned it on its head, and they have said, look, we've solved PFAS. And that was this summer, shortly after the announcement from the EPA. It's a PhD student, Mrs. Tran, I think. I don't want to butcher her name, so if it's not Mrs. Tran, I'm going to put it just here, the real name, so that I don't butcher her name, because really nothing against her work. But basically, I'm going to put it in layman terms so that even I can understand it. PFAS is a very complex chemical with a lot of fluorides and C bonds. Okay, so that's one thing. And PFAS also has a head and a tail, as you said. And between the head and the tail, there's some weaker bonds, which are carbon and oxygen bonds. And what she found is that if you are able to break the head and the tail, then the rest kind of falls together. You have to first break that and then break the rest. And she found a pretty convenient way to do that, which is to put this PFAS in a DMSO soup, and then the head and the tail fall off, and basically you solve it. But even when you listen to her being interviewed, which she was quite a lot, being in the press, being in articles, she says everywhere, guys, don't misunderstand what we did here. We understood something new about PFAS, but it is decades ahead from industrialization. If you were to do that today, it's bringing other problems linked to chemicals. It's incredibly more expensive than any other technology on the market, but there is some potential inside. So she never said, this is the miracle solution. She never said that. But dozens of press articles did that for her. They all wrote, that was the thing. You could not open LinkedIn this summer without seeing that article shared 3 times from 3 different sources and by 10 different people, which were like, oh, we solved PFAS. And with these false narratives, the problem is that I already understand maybe 10% of it. And I had the chance to do 2 deep dives on PFAS on my podcast, thanks to Henrik Hagemann, who really took me a bit into that word. I've done maybe 30 hours of preparation work for these 2 podcasts because I wanted to understand what Henrik sent my way. I've read papers, and still I grab only 10% of it because I'm not really a chemist, and it really reaches the limit of what I can understand. So I would consider me like medium to low educated, but a bit educated, and I understand 10%. Now you put from the New York Times, from the Boston Globe, from the Harvard Business Review, and from whomever who just retakes the papers and translates it in whomever language, where they say we solve PFAS. And you're the man in the street, and you're like, on one hand, EPA says it's 100,000 times more dangerous than it used to be. European Union says, by the way, my REACH regulation means that you will have to take care about that. The Nordic Council of Ministers says that it costs 110 euro per inhabitant per year in terms of health cost. And you're like, oh, no, big worry, big worry. And then there's an article that says, hey, come on, it's solved.
It's solved.
Let's move to the next problem. What's the next problem? Oh, World Cup in Qatar, so let's go play football. And that is, to me, beyond dangerous. It is a crime. It is a crime against science, and it is a crime against...
So you're shooting against the journalism.
Yes.
I know where you come from, and I see that. And actually, what I can say is I have a Google Alert on my computer. You know Google Alert. So that means for all who have no clue about Google Alert, you can go click in Google Alert and you can have some keywords, whatever that is, for instance, PFAS. And every morning, for instance, Google will give you a list about new articles which say something about PFAS. So that's Google Alert. And I have Google Alerts for PFAS, for micropollutants, and all the things. So I get a list every morning, 9 o'clock. You can see that. I get a list with new things. And in principle, if I would read them all, the world is free of problems, because everything is solved from the technical point of view. Micropollutants is solved. Microplastic is solved since I have Google Alert. PFAS, yes, I saw that, is also solved, but it is not solved. What are the guys doing? They just create something. They create content for their magazine, however reliable this magazine is, can be even the New York Times. They create just something, and then they put it just a little bit into the wrong context, and everybody thinks, the layman thinks out there on the street, well, the solved. Why are we talking about that? Why should I pay more wastewater for the bloody wastewater treatment plant here in Switzerland? Micropollutants is solved. I got the news this morning, and that is wrong education. That's true.
It made me think, it's going to be a stretch as an analogy, which I'm doing here. But it made me think of when these scientists found out a way to do in vitro meat.
Yeah.
Like meat which you grow in laboratories.
Which is good.
And there were so many articles saying, it's good, we solved everything, at the same climate change, everything. And then nobody said that the steak would be costing several tens of thousands. And nobody wants to...
The steak, I heard a podcast, and this steak they created was a couple of thousand, I think $10,000 US.
So we're not even speaking of the gold-plated things that you can have in the Turkish restaurant.
From Ribéry. No, 10,000. Nobody will eat that.
But when that is meat, everybody starts to understand that, I know that I've eaten meat. PFAS is an abstract topic, and you come to them and say it's solved. And you don't read the small asterisk, which sends you somewhere down in the article where they say, well, today it costs several millions. So that was my top 3, you see.
Okay, I take that. But isn't that also a little bit a call for us, for you, for me, who are out there, for instance, on LinkedIn, on social media platforms, on YouTube, whatever we produce, we should be very careful what we say. Even our stuff could be taken in the wrong context. Or other way around, we should be researched more deeply before saying something. So the question is, either we let everything the expert doing and nobody understands them, or we take people who get a little bit a glimpse of that and try to translate that to the layman out there on the street. It is a very dangerous game, because you have to understand that right, and you have to give the message right. If you do it wrong, then you have a very negative effect.
I'm a bit more pissed or sad when I see people which arguably know more on PFAS than me, and which are sharing these articles on LinkedIn saying, hey guys, sounds very promising, maybe we solve that. Because if you read it in depth, and if you read, I've read the paper of that team, and they say it black on white, it is not the solution. It is, we are starting to understand something.
You have to cook that for days, right?
Yeah. It takes time, it takes chemicals. There are lots of, it's not industrialized. But when highly technical people, which I would trust to be much better in the topic than I am, don't do this due diligence before sharing, or don't put like a disclaimer. Look, it's interesting, it goes in the right direction, but it is not to the stage where it is industrialized. If you don't, like me, have some hours to spend on stupid things to read scientific papers which you didn't know existed 10 minutes before, well, you're simply gonna swipe to the next thing, and that's dangerous. That means